Okay, let's talk about the memo format. So this is a zoomed out vantage point of a memo. You'll notice it's not very long at all. Very common with memos because they should be no longer than 1 or 2 pages. For the sake of the audience, they're really designed to be skimmed. Your audience should be able to peruse them very quickly and pull out only the information that they need. That whole purpose is pretty much the catalyst for the way this is designed. The top of it, you'll notice, is labeled memorandum or memo. That will help your audience to understand exactly what type of document they're looking at. Putting it at the very top will allow them to do some kind of a filing. Think about the context of this. If it's put into a file, if it's printed out in hard copy, then they'll be able to see at the very top of the file that it is a memo. Now, right beneath it, you'll see the to, from, date, and subject line. You'll notice that this is extremely similar to email. A memo is actually the predecessor of an email. Most businesses use emails much more than memos now, but you will see them used occasionally. And understanding how to put a good memo together will help you understand how to put a good email together. So it's a really important concept to understand. This again is just the zoomed out viewpoint, just kind of the layout. In a minute, I'll get into the specific sections and what each of them do, especially the beginning and the end. But for now, I want you to just notice a few other things. I want you to notice that it's single spaced, that each paragraph is 2, maybe 3 sentences. That's pretty normal. You'll want to do that. Oftentimes, actually, with a memo, you'll see bullet points. This one is not very common in that it does not have bullet points. But memos will almost always have bullet points because, again, you want the memo to be very skimmable so that your audience can quickly understand all the information that you need to present to them. You'll notice with the subject line of this memo that it is one subject and only one subject. This particular memo is about a student organization called Engineers Without Borders. I would actually advise this writer to be even more specific. I think what this memo does, it simply explains this organization. I would like the writer of this to actually do that, to actually say like background of Engineers Without Borders, because your reader needs to know precisely what the memo is about, because they may not have to read it at all, or they may not have to read it immediately, and they can they realize it's not as important as something else that they have to read, and they can set it aside and read it later. Remember, you're writing into your audience's habits. You're not trying to go against those habits. You're writing going with the grain on that. Okay, so that's pretty much the general outline of how this thing's going to look. Again, single spaced, to, from, date, subject line, put memo on top. One thing you'll notice about that bottom paragraph is that there's a follow-up there, and it's a follow-up contact. In this case, it's a meeting date. In many cases, your follow-up information at the very end of your memo is going to be like a phone number or an email address, because that's always continues the relationship with your audience. It says like, here's this information. If you have any questions or comments about it, please communicate with me and we'll continue to talk about it. Everything that you write in the business world is like a star in the constellation of the communication. This is just one part of the context of that grand communication that's occurring between you and this audience. So that's pretty much the layout of the memo. Now I'm going to try to zoom in, but I wasn't able to do it before. Okay, here we go. We're zooming in now. Let me zoom into the first paragraph of this memo. Now it's cut off a little bit with my camera angle, so I'm sorry about that. But let's just look right here, right after the subject line. What you're going to be doing with this first paragraph of the memo is you're going to indicate exactly what this memo is about and what this memo is trying to accomplish. And then you're also going to give us a little type of an organizational approach to it. So the first part of this first paragraph is going to basically say, this one doesn't, but it should say like, this memo is to inform you about the organization called Engineers Without Borders. It gives you a little background here. And then after it gives us a little background about this particular organization. Now remember, this is specific to the context of this communication. Memos are going to have all kinds of different introductions, but the formula beneath the introduction, though, is like, tell us what the purpose of the memo is, and then tell us the subtopics you're going to address. Now you'll notice that here. This memo will address EWB's main focuses, recent involvements, and the advantages of joining. This is your outline. Your outline is provided right up front for your reader. Then your reader knows that your subtopics are going to be presented in the same order. Remember, the main focus was addressed first, and here's our bold headline, main focus. Recent involvements was then addressed. Here's our bold headline, recent involvements. Advantages of joining was then addressed. Here's our bold headline, advantages of joining. Now, a lot of the stuff, again, is designed so that this information can be skimmable. Maybe this audience doesn't need to know about the recent involvements, but they're considering joining Engineers Without Borders. Well, then they'll zoom right to advantages of joining. They're going to skim right to that. Okay, so that's what your first paragraph does. Indicates what the purpose of the memo is, explains the organization. The body of the memo then addresses each of these subtopics as you introduce them in the first paragraph. Oftentimes it'll use bullet points. And another thing so after your body paragraph, you'll have something like this. You'll have a conclusion that just briefly sums things up. Say something like this. This memo has addressed the main focus, recent involvements, and advantages of joining EWB, Engineers Without Borders. If you have any questions or comments about the organization or would like to discuss it further, please contact me at, let's just put mine in there, strat24@uwm.edu, or 507-304-0223. Okay, this is extremely important, right? This is going to be your follow-up contact information that comes at the very end of the body of the memo. It also is summarizing what the memo addressed. So again, it makes it skimmable. It reminds the person of what was acknowledged in this memo, and it invites further communication, further discussion with your audience. So let me zoom back out one more time, give you one more look at this memo. Here it is. Short 1 or 2 pagers. You got your bold headlines. You've got single spaced. There's going to be double space between each paragraph. Each paragraph is relatively short. Your first paragraph tells us a little bit about what the memo is going to address. It gives us the organizational pattern that you're going to use for the body of the memo. And then the organizational pattern is then played out with bold headlines in the middle of the memo. And at the end, you're going to summarize what you mentioned in the body of the memo, and you're going to provide follow-up information. Now, one thing I see a lot in memos is signing it off like a letter. That'd be something like this. Let me zoom in for you to show you. Say something like, "Thanks for your time, Reed Stratton." That's a no-no right there. Okay, people who look at your memo are going to realize that you don't have a lot of experience writing memos if you have a sign-off. Okay, this is not a letter; it's a memo. It's not something that's to be read the way a letter is to be read. A letter is to be read from the beginning to the end. A memo is to be skipped around and skimmed, and you don't want to end it like a letter. However, in my next lecture, I will explain a little bit about how to set up and format a letter. But for now, that's all I got. Thank you very much. Good luck with your memos.